Since the Israeli victories in the wars of 1948 and 1956, the Arab coalition, led by Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, was determined to alter the regional dynamics by defeating Israel. Both sides knew that the conflict was far from over and were gearing up for the next phase of confrontation. International interference and inability to reach a settlement made one of the most iconic conflicts of the modern era, the Six-Day War, inevitable. On May 13, 1967, the Soviet Union falsely informed Egypt that the Israeli defense forces had concentrated 11 to 13 brigades with the intention of striking Syria. In response, Egypt began amassing troops along the border with Israel in the Sinai, and on May 16, demanded the UN peacekeeping forces leave the peninsula. Simultaneously, Israel refused the UN request to deploy the UNEF on their side of the border. Over the next few days, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and Sudan started mobilizing their forces. Iraq sent expeditionary forces to Jordan, and Saudi Arabia signaled its willingness to join the military actions. The decisive moment that made a full-scale confrontation unavoidable was Egypt's decision to block Israeli ships from the Straits of Tiran on May 22 and 23. On June 1st, Israel formed a national unity government, which decided to go to war on June 4th. The Arab coalition of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria had a numerical advantage over Israel, with 100,000 troops against 100,000, 2,000 tanks against 800, and 957 aircrafts against 300. Israel planned to strike on June 5th with Operation Focus, targeting the Egyptian Air Force. Israeli media falsely reported that Israel soldiers were on vacation while their pilots continued training sorties as usual. Their intelligence ensured this training was realistic as possible. They also sabotaged the US Embassy tracking antenna to prevent the Americans from discovering the operation before it's commenced. The Israeli pilots were informed about the operation's start only 5 hours in advance, and at the time, the Egyptian air defense system was effectively inactive. On June 5th, nearly 200 Israeli aircraft attacked 14 Egyptian airfields, catching them completely by surprise. Within 3 hours, 338 Egyptian aircrafts were destroyed, and 100 pilots were killed. The Jordanian and Syrian air forces retaliated by attacking Israel at 11 a.m. on June 5th. In response, the Israeli Air Force struck their airfields, resulting in the destruction of all 28 Jordanian, 53 Syrian, and 10 Iraqi planes. Operation Focus was a decisive success. Israel lost only 19 planes in this operation, securing total air dominance for the remainder of the war. The ground war unfolded on 3 fronts: the Sinai, Jordanian, and Syrian fronts. In the Sinai, Egypt forces comprised 7 divisions, 4 armored, 2 infantry, and 1 mechanized infantry, totaling 100,000 troops and 900 to 950 tanks. In response, Israel amassed 3 divisions, including 6 armored brigades, 1 infantry brigade, 1 mechanized infantry brigade, and 3 paratrooper brigades, amounting to 7,000 men and 700 tanks. Israel's strategy aimed to surprise the Egyptians by launching airstrikes and attacking through the northern and central routes in the Sinai Peninsula, deviating from the central and southern routes used in the past. At 7:50 a.m. on June 5th, the northernmost Israeli division, led by Major General Israel Tai, initiated its advance toward Arisha via Gaza, intending to encircle Khan Yunis while directing paratroopers to Rafah. Initially, Egyptian resistance was minimal, as their intelligence misjudged this as a diversion rather than a main assault. However, opposition intensified against the 16th Armored Brigade. Despite this, Israeli forces reached the Khan Yunis railway junction within 4 hours, advancing on Shia Zawid. They overcome fierce Egyptian resistance, aided by air superiority. By 8 a.m. on June 6, elements of the 79th Armored Battalion of the 7th Brigade entered Arish amid unexpected enemy fire from balconies and windows, resulting in a fierce battle for control, eventually secured with reinforcements. The northernmost division then bifurcated, with one segment continuing toward the Suez Canal while the other headed south, capturing Bir Lafan and Jabal by June 6. The Israeli 38th Armored Division, led by Major General Ariel Sharon, comprising 18,000 men and 150 tanks, faced off against the Egyptian 2nd Infantry Division under Major General Saadi Naguib, with 16,000 troops and 19 tanks. Israel's advance toward Abu Aghila was successful, with paratroopers disrupting Egyptian positions, leading to a weakened defensive and IDF's capture of Katef. A fierce tank battle ensued, culminating in an Israeli triumph, with 14 Egyptian and 19 Israeli tanks destroyed. Despite the relative strength of the Egyptian forces in Sinai, Field Marshal Abdel Hakim Amr panicked upon learning of Abu Aghila's fall and hastily ordered a retreat, lacking specific directives. This chaotic retreat diminished the Egyptians' defensive capacity. In subsequent days, the IDF pressed westward, inflicting heavy losses despite sporadic resistance, such as at Bir Gafgafa. Israeli airstrikes and disorderly retreats eroded Egyptian morale. Rather than pursuing the retreating Egyptian, the IDF opted to seize 3 passes from Sinai to the Egyptian mainland, turning them into killing zone, resulting in significant Egyptian casualties. The capture of Sinai concluded with the fall of Sharm el-Sheikh on June 7 and Ras Sudar on June 8. An armistice brokered by the UN Security Council was achieved on June 9. Israel sought to avert conflict with Jordan and Syria until defeating Egypt, yet its offers of neutrality to Jordan were rebuffed as Egyptian President Nasser convicted King Hussein that Egypt held the upper hand against Israel. On the morning of June 5th, hostilities commenced, but Israel made a final effort to evade confrontation with Jordan by conveying a peace plea through the UN envoy. Nonetheless, King Hussein dismissed it as too late. With the Jordanian Air Force already en route, Jordanian and Iraqi aircraft bombarded Israel-held West Jerusalem, resulting in 16 military and 20 civilian casualties and the destruction of 900 structures. In response, Israel launched its own air assault under Operation Focus, rippling Jordan's military air infrastructure and securing Israeli air supremacy. At that time, Jordan controlled East Jerusalem, and its forces occupied strategic positions in the UN residence, the government house, to shell the Israeli sector. Israel Jerusalem Brigade, Reserved Battalion 161, despite heavy losses, seized the government house, compelling Jordanian retreat to Bethlehem. Subsequently, Israel encircled East Jerusalem, deploying the Jerusalem Brigade from the south and the mechanized Horror Brigade and 15th Paratrooper Brigade from the north. A fierce battle ensued for Ammunition Hill, where Jordanian resistance was formidable, resulting in the loss of almost all Israeli attacking officers, but achieving the objective after 4 hours. The 55th Paratrooper Brigade then advanced eastward, securing Mount Scopus and prevailing over other Jordanian positions near the American colony. By evening on June 5th, the mechanized Harel Brigade seized Latron and Ramallah. The 163rd Infantry Battalion secured Abu Tor, isolating the old city from Bethlehem and Hebron. On June 7th, Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan ordered the IDF to enter the old city despite reservations from the Israeli government. with the paratroopers conducting the operation to minimize damage to holy sites. The IDF seized control of the old city with minimal resistance. Judea, Hebron, Bethlehem, and Nablus were also captured by the IDF on June 7. Remaining Jordanian forces retreated into Jordan, marking another victory for Israel. Syria, swayed by Nasser's assurances of Egyptian success, dispatched its air force to strike Galilee, only to be intercepted by Israeli aircraft. A minor ground assault was also launched by Syria in an attempt to seize water plants at Tel Dan and Shire Yashov, but was repelled by the IDF. Israeli air superiority, Syrian unit communications failures, and tanks too wide for bridges thwarted the Syrian attack. Consequently, Syria abandoned ground offensives, opting for airstrikes instead. However, on the evening on June 5th, Israel targeted Syrian airfields in Operation Focus, decimating 2/3 of the Syrian air force and compelling the remainder to withdraw from the conflict. The Israeli leadership debated whether to engage Syria, but Syria used the Golan Heights to shell Israel. The prospect of battling a fortified enemy on uphill terrain loomed. However, intelligence indicating Syria's weakened positions, especially in the Golan Heights, prompted Dayan to launch an offensive without government consent. The Israeli offensive commenced with airstrikes, severely damaging Syrian army defensive and morale. Colonel Albert Mandler, 8th Armored Brigade, spearheaded the advance into the Golan Heights from Kibbutz Ein Gef. Despite heavy casualties in the challenging terrain, IDF, aided by air support, captured the Zaur Ala and Ein Fit fortresses. In the central sector, the Israeli 181 Battalion secured the strongholds of Dardara and Tel Hilal after fierce combat. By June 9 evening, Israel reached the plateau, enabling reinforcements. By dawn, 8 brigades were poised for a second-line assault. Subsequently, a ceasefire was negotiated around the Purple Line, and military action ceased by June 11. Casualties included up to 983 Israelis, 15,000 Egyptians, 700 Jordanians, and 2,500 Syrians. Israel's significant victory saw it seize the Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights, placing around 1 million Arabs under its direct control in the newly acquired territories. The Israeli triumph stemmed from superior military leadership, troop preparation, and intelligence. However, the Six-Day War didn't mark the end of conflicts. 6 years later, tensions escalated into another war.